But here's our book. It's called Denial. It's about this increasing phenomenon. We're talking now more than a million children and young adults who are affected with autism. That's $1 trillion cost to our economy. And there are very few old people with autism, so this is a new phenomenon. And it's kind of obvious to most people who are close to the issue. But increasingly, we're running into a narrative, a pernicious narrative, that there's really nothing here, that this whole phenomenon is socially constructed, and there is no such thing as an autism epidemic. This new orthodoxy, this new idea that autism is ancient, and it's just a genetic variation, and it's just an underappreciated group of people that just need acceptance. But if you believe the reverse, which is the reality, that it's a recent phenomenon, that it's growing, and because of its growth in a very short period of time, it must be caused by something in the environment. Just to give you two examples of this, there are two books that motivated us to write this, and both books were widely praised and celebrated. This one is called Neurotribes by a fellow named Steve Silberman. Silberman's idea is that autism is nothing new, that we should celebrate autism. Autism is a wonderful thing. It's just a different way of being, and neurodiversity is a new form of tolerance that we should all exercise. The other book that came out shortly after Silberman's in 2017 was written by two ABC News reporters, John Donvan and Karen Zucker. It's a close cousin of Silberman's argument, and it's all, let's not worry about the problem. Let's not face reality. Let's just celebrate in an ABC News, 2-minute feature, a person of, autism is the disease of the week, and let's celebrate it and be happy about it. The original pioneers of the condition that we now call autism were two people, Leo Kanner, the guy on the upper left, and Hans Asperger, and I got this pretty cool. Leo Kanner wrote an article in 1943 in a journal called The Nervous Child, and it was entitled Autistic Disturbances of Affective Contact. It was written about 11 children, all born in the 1930s, all of whom came to Kanner in his clinic. He was at Johns Hopkins. He was the world's leading expert in child psychiatry. And no one had ever seen this phenomenon before Leo Kanner wrote about it. Hans Asperger was the director of a child clinic in Vienna, and within months of Kanner, who wrote in April of 1943, he wrote this was submitted in October of 1943, although it was actually published in 1944, but they were writing basically at the same time. He was writing in German about autistic psychopathy in children. Both of these guys are pretty normal. They just happened to be in a place and at a time where they observed a new population of children, and they wrote about it. And if autism didn't become an important problem, you would have never heard about them. And Kanner's article began with this sentence, and this is one of these sentences that I've tried to commit to memory. This is his 1943 article. Since 1938, he wrote, there have come to our attention a number of children whose condition differs so markedly and uniquely from anything reported heretofore. This was the man at Johns Hopkins, wrote the first textbook on child psychiatry. People from around the world brought their tough cases to him, from around the United States, certainly. And he began seeing he saw his first child in 1938. So just to put that in context, today, the U.S. population is about 325 million. In 1931, it was smaller, but it was still pretty big, about 124 million. So this was the catchment area for his practice, basically. He was the leading expert in the U.S. for child psychiatry. And if in 1931, if autism was truly ancient, and let's take the 1 in 68 number that now, if you go to the CDC, is the most commonly used number for the prevalence of autism, that would have said that if autism was constant prevalence, had always been with us at a rate of 1 in 68, that there would have been 1.8 million Americans in America, in Connor's day with autism before he wrote those words. Now, 1.8 million, that's a lot of people and a lot of children. And you would have thought that somebody might have mentioned it, but Connor wrote his article about 11 children as if it had never happened before. And so that's just absurd. I mean, so that, again, a reality check. So Connor's one marker. There's not a whisper of autism in the history of mankind before 1943. So it's a ridiculous notion. And by the way, that's an extraordinary claim. The notion that autism is ancient is an extraordinary claim, and it requires extraordinary proof. Leo Connor observed 11 children. The first one of them was the one he saw in 1938. So when he says since 1938, we've seen a number of children whose condition differ so markedly and uniquely. The first child with autism he saw, and remember, he was the world's expert in child psychiatry. He had seen hundreds, if not thousands, of children with various disorders, and he saw this case in 1938 that sparked a difference. The case was a man named Donald Triplett. He's alive today. And whenever all of you go around, in the world and you hear this argument, you hear, oh, well, there's an autism increase. Well, oh, really? That's interesting. I hear that we're doing a better job diagnosing. You are hearing the propaganda. That is the false, pernicious idea that people in authority are spreading as a narrative, which is, oh, it doesn't really matter if there's an epidemic, because actually, if there was an epidemic, that creates a moral and social responsibility to find the cause. Before 1930, the rate of autism in the world was effectively 0. So we're in denial, and the problem is that we made a big mistake. We've got this, clearly something happened. It happened around 1990. We clearly have responsibility to do it, and you know what? Someone did something wrong. And when we err as a society on that scale, this is one of my favorite philosophers, Karl Popper, it's very hard to learn from very big mistakes. And we've made a big mistake, and we've got a lot of people that are invested in denial. And there's one very clear thing that's going on, which is there's money. And there's a profit web that supports this industry. And you know what? If part of the mistake, I think it's a big part, it's not the only part, but if part of the mistake we've made as a society is that we've over-vaccinated a generation of children, and this, by the way, the vaccine manufacturing business is a big business. Right at the heart of it is Big Pharma. And I put my little thing on there if it wouldn't shut off the whole slide. The vaccine business is a big industry. There are 4 big manufacturers, almost nobody else. $25 billion in revenue, probably a 30-35% profit margin on that, just as rich as the drug business. And so they're right in the heart of it. And then you know what? The biggest influence is the networks. They make $3.5 billion off of drug advertising. And you know where that goes? It's the evening news. And we just went through and counted all the ads. And their ads for prescription drugs are over the counter, and in every case, in every network, close to half of the advertisement count is drug company ads. You get the news eventually that the advertisers pay for, and the drug companies are paying for the evening news. So no surprise, we don't get, what we get as a narrative is, Andy Wakefield is evil, he lied about the autism vaccine link, the vaccine link has been denied, and everybody should just go to the doctor and get their shots. We have this whole tsunami of young autistic people, and there weren't many adults, there didn't used to be. We don't have senior citizens with autism, maybe 1,000 or 2 in the population. But we have this impending wave of affected people, disabled people entering our services system, and it's a system that is not prepared for it. And it's just started to deal with it. When these kids are in their 50s and 60s, their parents are going to die. Who's going to take care of them? And so I say to you, this is, better diagnosing is not this sort of benign hypothesis. It's a pernicious, wrong, damaging, irresponsible hypothesis. So that's the message. Denial is important. The autism problem is a national emergency. We're not treating that like we should. And it's all of our collective responsibility to wake up our families, our communities, our legislators. Thanks to Dan. Thanks to all of you.
Thank you very much.